how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to number 3 in my journey of mixing down this new track. As I mentioned before, basically, I have an artist that I'm developing, and I did a track, and I started a track on the MPC Live. Then I stemmed out all the elements and imported them into Logic, and now I'm mixing them. Thus far, what I've done so far is basically I organized everything. I've got all the track orders. I got the drums up top. Then I have the melodic episodes. The melodic elements next, and then I have the accents last. I've put icons on all the tracks, and basically now I'm ready to start actually mixing. So as you can see here, here's the project. I got the bass drum, the snare, hi-hat, claps, then the bass. And so from the bass up to the drums, that's considered the rhythm section. And then I have a voice effect, a synth lead, and some orchestral hits. And then I have the master output. So the last episode, I did everything that I just described, and now I'm going to start mixing. So I'm going to bring in each element as it appears. So we're going to start with the bass drum. I'm going to pick a section and do a loop section. And again, I want to do it in a manner of placing the sounds where I want them in the stereo field and as far as volume is concerned, because I want to make sure there's plenty of space for the vocals when they finally do come. So I don't want things to be too loud, because I still have to master this once everything is done. So I'm probably going to bring it down. Typically minus 11. Yeah. Minus 11 is typically the loudest thing that I want hitting. All right, so next will be the snare. And I'm using 3 snares on here for various reasons, to give different flavors for different parts of the song. See, this is dry, while this snare has reverb on it. So I mix the two together. And the one without the reverb cuts through the mix and can be heard more. And I'm keeping an eye on this overall global volume. As far as priority sound, again, it's going to be the bass drum, snare, and the hi-hats are probably going to drive this track. Speaking of hi-hats, minus 10. We've gone up 1 decibel. Now the bass drum and the bass synth, or in this case the bass synthesizer, that's going to be the elements that are going to push in volume. So that's what I have to be careful of. So I'm going to go to a section where the bass synthesizer kicks in. Right here. And I'll bring that in. Again, I want to make sure that the bass drum is still dominant, and the snares. Then I have a synthesizer lead. So I've broken the 10 dB ceiling. Now I'm going to bring in these orchestra hits. And see, the orchestra hits give the song, the orchestra hits. So each sound element has obviously a function, right? You know, drums for rhythm, you know, bass for solid, you know, foundation. But this orchestra, basically, I chose it and I played it for the purpose of making it sound large, making the track sound dramatic. And typically, you know, orchestras are used for very dramatic, you know, emphasis. So that's what I want. So when it comes in, I want it to be wide and kind of covering all the other elements, not in volume, but as far as in thickness or as far as presence. You know, I don't want it to be fighting for any space. Okay. Again, I'm still listening for the bass drum and the snares and hi-hats, because those are the driving elements throughout the entire song, regardless of what sounds come in. These are just some vocal elements. Again, I'm keeping my eye on this overall global peak level. have this snare to add. So I'm going to slide this portion of the song forward. I mean, the cycle forward. And I will bring up the snare. Now I'm starting to notice that the hi-hats are getting kind of pushed in the back, so I need to find the hi-hats. And bring them up a little bit. There we go. Still over 10, but I got plenty of headroom here for mastering and for adding the rap or vocals or whatever it's going to be. Okay, and as I said before, the lower frequencies have a lot more energy to them. So therefore, low frequency instruments such as bass drums and bass guitars and synthesized basses, they're going to push your volumes up a little bit. So as you can tell, I have another element here. I have a second bass drum, and this one actually has reverb on it. So I'm going to go to that section of the song and bring that bass drum up. And I'm a little nervous because, again, that's low frequency energy, or LFE. And hopefully that doesn't bring my overall peak levels too high. We'll find out. So you brought it up a little bit. Now I'm at -8. But see, it's kind of like just a heartbeat effect. Again, for drama, to distinguish this portion of the song from the others. So it doesn't have to be in the forefront, just enough for you to hear that reverb. Here's the regular bass drum. Almost like someone banging on a door in a faint, down a hallway. You can faintly hear it. So I'm really just looking for that reverb tail. And the articulation comes from the first bass drum. That's the articulation. And that's the reverb. Snare is still there, the hi-hats are still topping out. Awesome. So I think the final element I haven't brought in yet are the claps, and they're high frequency, so I don't have to worry about that taking too much. That should cut through the mix pretty easily. So I'm going to move to the where they come in. And I've also, to make space for it, I've also, you can also pan your sounds to get out of the way of what you want to be dominant. You know, you want your bass drum to be dominant, so you have that in the center of the stereo field. These other elements, as you can see, the hi-hats are on the right, snares on the left, and this one's a little bit to the right. I've done the same thing for the claps, just to make space. So it's heard, but not in the way. And again, watching this, making sure I have good headroom for adding total volume. Because again, I still have to add the vocals. You know, we have to do a recording session with the vocalist. Now, as you can tell, the way I approach mixing is I'm just sharing with you my thoughts in my processes, what I'm taking into consideration, such as the organizational pieces, how to place things in the stereo field, the fact that I'm constantly monitoring the peak level, knowing that I still have to add another element such as vocals. That's probably going to be, you know, I mean, this is a basic little demo track, so it's probably just going to be like 7 tracks of vocals. And then after that, once I mix the vocals in, I have to master it and stuff. So I'm constantly thinking from the present and the future, present, future, present, future. Oh yeah, I also got to think about stereo. I got to think about this. So I'm constantly, my brain is constantly going around and all those things. And I take my time. It's almost like putting together a puzzle. No rush. I'm not trying to compete with anything. And I'm enjoying myself. I'm doing it at a pace that I can understand, that I'm learning, and that the client it will enjoy the final product, and 2, it meets the industry standards as far as the tonality and the levels, so that when I do hand this off to the client, that they can go ahead and they can put it on Spotify, and it meets all the criteria, the technical criteria for broadcasting and stuff. So that's what all these videos have been about, is just kind of sharing with you the process. See, and in this part of the song, there are no snares. Basically, the claps have taken the place of the snare. Oh, excuse me, there's only one snare versus the other 2 snares. And I may do some automation. In other words, when different parts of the song happen, I may do some automation, such as like in this section, I might bring this particular snare track down in volume to allow the hand claps to come up in volume, or to be more dominant. And then when that section is over, you know, I will bring the hand claps down and bring the snare back up. You know, that automation allows it so that everything that I want to be in the foreground or to cut through is able to do so without messing up the overall peak levels, and to leave space for the mastering process. I'll listen to it from the beginning. So as I'm playing this, I'm thinking, I think the snare needs to cut through a little bit more. And as I said before, the reverb creates drama. It creates a dramatic effect. And this is the opening part. This is where the melody is. This is what's going to grab the listener to bring them in. And again, folks, saving as you work really helps a lot because you want to save frequently just in case the system crashes or your particular DAW decides to flake out on you. At least when it opens up, you've got a more recent version of the track for all the hard work that you're doing. Now, because this is basically the chorus of the song, this particular synth, that's basically going to be the melody. That's what I want people to remember. So that needs to be at the forefront of as far as placement and volume of the other elements, so that the person remembers that and they recognize, okay, here's the chorus again, here's the hook. So I'm just bringing that up just a little bit. Now, I want to add some drama to this particular portion. And as I mentioned before, reverb creates drama. So I'm going to add some Space Designer to this. And I'm going to do a medium plate, probably 1.3 seconds. Nice. Without. Here it is with it, with the reverb. right. So I'll touch base on these settings or whatever. I'm sure everybody already knows these, but pre-delay, that's the time until that passes until the effect kicks in. So in other words, for 188 milliseconds, no reverb will be applied. So for 188 milliseconds of time will pass, and then the reverb gets applied. So that means that only this portion of the particular sample gets the reverb. This becomes, the reason why this is an important element is that reverb, obviously, it's a form of, it mixes reflections and stuff, and I'm not going to get all nerdy on it and everything, but basically too much reverb can make things sound muddy. And remember, we already focused on, we put in a lot of work on placing all of the elements. We put a lot of work into placing all the elements in their respective locations. Remember, we talked about the drums. Is it going to be from the audience perspective as far as the hi-hat on the left and the crash cymbal on the right? We put the bass drum in the center. We had the synthesizer on one side, the bass on the other side, things like that. So when you start adding reverb, that's basically almost like a wash, and it just makes everything blend together. So by adding pre-delay, it allows the notes to come out clear and unaffected by the reverb, and then the later half, what they consider the tail, to be affected by the reverb. That way you have some articulation of the sound, and then you have the reverb on the later half of the sound. So that way you can hear the S's, the T's, when someone speaks, versus everything sounding muddy. When you add reverb, obviously reverb creates the illusion of distance. So on this, I don't want this lead sound to sound like it's distant or far off in the distance, because it is the hook. It is the sound of the chorus. So I want that up front and nice and crisp, but I also want the later half of the sound to be wide and dramatic. So it's up front, up front and present and articulate, and then wide and dramatic on the later half of the sound. So that's where pre-delay is really important. The other parameter is the length. That's how long the reverb itself, once it kicks in, that's how long that's the time it takes in order for sound to drop. I believe it's like 20 dB. There's a particular measurement, and that's the amount of time it takes to drop that amount of that much in volume. The size is basically, that's the percentage of the size. Like if you had a small room and you want it to be 100% of that particular room, or do you want it only 50% of that particular room? The crossover, that's how much of the effect gets placed on the low frequency or the high frequency. So if you have a crossover and you say, okay, well, I want the low effect or the low frequencies to be affected by the reverb 100%, then you can set it so that right now it's set to 850 hertz. So that means everything up to 850 hertz, gets affected a certain way, and then everything above 850 gets affected a different way. So that way you can basically split the amount of effect that the sound gets affected by. And then you have the dry and wet. So this is the original sound. Actually, I'll just play it for you. So that's the original unaffected dry sound. This is the processed sound, or what they call the wet sound. And you mix that. And see, here's the pre-delay effect. I'm going to increase the pre-delay, and you'll hear the reverb happening later and later on, as far as when the sound is playing. See, it's happening instantaneously. But if I increase that it happens after 206 milliseconds have passed. So now that I've added the reverb, I have the drama that I want. It's getting there. Now I'm noticing that the bass is starting to get pushed in the back. So I need to now adjust the bass volume. Still keeping my eye on the peak overall master output. All right. All right, here's the second chorus. See, and this is where the second bass drum comes in. It has that reverb. So it gives it a little bit more of a dark tone, a little bit more drama. All right, so these claps. So these claps are a little bit dry to me. So I'm going to add some reverb. And to keep consistent, when it comes down to verbs and delays, I typically use the same reverbs and the same delay so that things don't sound way too spacey, or too strange, like they're coming from different areas and stuff. So I'm going to add this same designer. So I can go up here and I can copy this setting that I had for the synth lead. I can go to the claps, add. Now in Logic, it remembers the latest and greatest, or the latest effects plugins, the recent ones. And the latest one I just messed with was Space Designer, and it's stereo. So I select that, double click it, and I just have to hit paste. Now you might have to do some tweaking, but at least the settings of the delay, the settings of the effect are the same as in the orchestral. As in the synth lead. So I don't like, because the claps are rhythmic, that pre-delay there is throwing off the rhythm. So I'm going to get rid of that pre-delay. There you go. See, before, what was it about like that? See, it sounds off. The rhythm is off, so I get rid of it. And here it is without. Doesn't sound bad, but it just sounds plain. This just adds a little bit of drama. And seeing that I've added drama using the bass drum that has reverb on it, it's fitting to add a little bit of drama to this track as well. All right. So the next step is going to be for me to bounce this out. All the work that I've done here is I'm going to bounce this out, and then I'm going to master that bounce and then send to the client for them to listen to and come up with some words or come up with some lyrics or rap or whatever. But I like to at least master the, what I call their reference track, so they have the best quality, so they get the most emotion and impact from it. I might add more stuff, I might take away stuff, but this is basically the the skeleton of the musical idea that I'm going to send to this particular artist that I'm trying to develop. So I'm going to export this, then I'm going to master it. So again, it's for the client. It's my idea as far as music, but you're collaborating, you're working with another artist. So you want to give them the best, cleanest understanding of what musical idea you have. So I'm going to export this and then I'm going to master it, get the volumes nice and hot without distorting. And then they can listen to it and they'll give me some feedback and they'll have a good enough quality so that they can do their part and write out their rhymes or their lyrics or whatever. All right. So that'll be for the next video. Thanks for tagging along. You take care. God bless.